Hello and welcome back to the Adam Hazara Show, here from a studio of my own bedroom in Burke, Virginia. This is episode 6. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in today on YouTube. We're just going live right now. Of course, before we get started, please make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, share this video with a friend. Any mailbag questions can be posted in the chat. You can also tag the show on X at Adam Hazara Show. The A, the H, and the S are all uppercase. Or you could email show at theadamhazarashow@gmail.com. All lowercase, the letters in that. Without further ado, let's get started with today's show. So, on today's show, got some interesting things to talk about going on in Bruins hoops. Now that the basketball season has started for Lake Braddock and pretty much all of Northern Virginia, we will kind of be shifting our focus away from football now that the season is over. We're going to be talking about more so the stuff that's happening in basketball since that season is now kicking and going. So we got some interesting stuff today about what Lake Braddock boys hoops did over the weekend. Of course, they had a really interesting but a blowout loss to Edison, 73-43. Also be taking a look at some of the other matchups they got going on this week with Robinson, South County. Same for the girls. We were talking about their losses over the weekend. They actually had 2. They played the one game on Friday versus Edison. They got blown out 56-18, got one by 38 points. And then on Saturday, they lost to Broad Run, a team from 4A and out in Ashburn over in Loudoun County, 45-29. And we also got some interesting news out of the baseball and softball department of Lake Braddock. Now, of course, those seasons are not going on right now. They're not going on for another 3 months until March when the spring rolls around. But we have some information regarding what their out-of-district schedule will look like coming this spring. So we'll get into that too. So I want to start off today, guys, with some Lake Braddock boys basketball talk. So, of course, they had that interesting but blowout loss to Edison, 73-43 on Friday at Edison. And we also saw the likes of Xavier Main, who's been the Bruins' leading scorer, make his Bruins debut on Friday. Now, of course, he was not playing these first 2 games of the season because he was still playing football with Lake Braddock. And now that the football season has ended, he can now focus on basketball. He's still playing that this year. And, really, you got to say, in his debut, he didn't really have the best game, at least offensively. I was watching the highlights on Max Preps today. Not really showing him to do much. I think he had a block. That's about it. But I don't really think much scoring was done on his end. Not really so much for a whole Bruins team either. And I'll tell you right away, this Bruins team, they've, so far this season, they've been in a lot of games, mostly because that their defense has been playing really well. They've been really playing well because of their defense, and they've come up clutch. That's what they did in that one game versus Marshall last Tuesday at Lake Braddock. And really, they've not really been scoring much. They've, of course you have, Tyee Clayton, the transfer from Rock Creek Christian, who's been doing really well. He had 2 games so far with 20-plus points scored, which is really good, of course. And then, but also, you've had, mainly I said defensively, you talk about McComb and a Paint, who's really good. And now I know defensively, he still had a really good game against a pretty good Edison team. He was really good in that game versus Marshall. I believe he had about 14 rebounds, if I'm not mistaken. But, overall, the Bruins, defensively did not show up that game versus Edison. Now, I'm not sure if it's a matter of just Edison being a better team. Now, they do seem to be really good this year. They are 4-1. And this is one of 2 examples of a National District team that is actually a true contender. Basically, a good example of that and prove that a good, that there are good National District teams out there that can actually compete with the big guns, the teams that are real competitors that are outside of their district. And Edison, of course, in both boys and girls basketball, one of a few examples of that. Of course, you have Hayfield, of course, in basketball as well. Of course, football this past season, regardless of the recruitment allegations that were around them. Lewis in boys soccer is number one. Hayfield in boys soccer a couple years ago was an example of one. But overall, there's not really a lot of examples you can pull out. Not a lot of teams in that district have had a lot of success. Not really a competitive sports district as a whole, and majority of the sports, of course, except for the few examples I just gave to you guys. But this was a game that I think a lot of people expected to be really close. Again, the defense did not come up. Now, going to this game, I thought that was going to be the case too. I thought the defense was going to hold up. Now, I thought Edison was still going to be a tough test for Bruins. Edison has been a very tough team, as I said, in basketball the last 2 years in boys. And so, at the very least, if a Bruins were going to lose, I thought it was going to still be a relatively close game. I thought you maybe see it, both teams scoring between 50 and 60 points, I would say. But Bruins didn't even score 50. Edison scored way more than I expected. I think there's quite a few people who thought it would be much closer than what that was on the wall coming into that. And the Bruins just got throttled. It was like that the whole game. I mean, they were down. They weren't really hitting those clutch shots that they needed to, and that they were in that Marshall game at home. Of course, the Bruins, with that Marshall win, got some really good momentum. What happened Friday was just otherworldly. This is probably one of those situations where maybe, they said, okay, maybe we got too complacent, after, beating that Marshall team. And legitimately, that's a really good Marshall team with a lot of talent. Definitely one of the better teams over in the Northern region. And, I don't really think a lot of people expected Lake Braddock to pull off a win like that. I mean, it was very tenacious. It was a very gritty win. Good for the Bruins for that. But, even if the Bruins, seem to be talented, we're probably the most talented that they have been since the 2021-22 school year, which is the last time that they were over 500 and seemed like a legitimate contender for states. And that hasn't been like that for the last couple of years, as they've really struggled since then. But, I feel like, the Bruins probably just got too ahead of themselves, and that really killed their momentum that game. And so that's why, they were probably kind of taught a lesson there. And, that loss should be sending a message saying that, hey, we got too ahead of ourselves after being a very good Marshall team. So let's calm down and remain more level-headed going forward. And that's really what you're going to need, coming up this week for Lake Braddock. You're facing an improved Robinson team, and I'll break them down in a second. But then you're also and we'll say this right now about them. They're an improved team. Last year they're kind of slouch, not nearly as competitive as some of the other Patriot District teams. The Patriot District overall is very, very competitive. One of the most competitive districts in the whole state in basketball, and has been like that for a while now. But again, Robinson and boys has not been there a lot, up there with some of the other contenders we've seen. Lake Braddock, of course, has been there a couple times. You have Woodson, South County for sure, Fairfax, Alexandria City, West Potomac. There's a nice handful of teams that I just spoke of there. Again, I know that's a very good South County team we're facing. They probably want to get some good momentum also going into spring break, or I should say winter break, going into their tournament that they're hosting the day after Christmas. They're playing Heritage from Loudoun County. There's also some other tough teams in that tournament. I know there's a team from West Virginia playing in that, Jefferson High School. There's an Oakton team that they previously faced. Of course, they lost to them in their second game this season, 43-40. And then some other, I think, a couple other solid teams in there too. Light Ridge from Loudoun County, one of the newer schools in Northern Virginia, is in that as well. But facing the Heritage Pride, I believe, who's out from Leesburg. Loudoun County, they're a Class 4A team. But again, but this is Bruins got to get some momentum going. They really want to, like I said, be part of the upper echelon of teams in the region. Now, I think it will still be hard for them because, of course, mention, not just in Patriot, of course, I previously mentioned Hayfield, Edison. They're also up there in the region. And then, you probably still have South County, Woodson. Fairfax still seems to be very good. Those are 5 solid teams right there. And I feel like with other teams, Alexandria City, West Potomac, I know that they lost a lot of, talent either for graduation or just had players transfer out. I know for West Potomac and Alexandria City, we had combined 4 players that transferred out. All of them went over to Bishop O'Connell over in Arlington. Now, that's a big loss for both of those teams. I know Alexandria City had Darius Bivens, who was a young prospect, really great players, getting a lot of D1 looks, getting some D1 offers. He transferred to O'Connell. And ironically enough, with West Potomac had 3 underclassmen who were all district last year. They all transferred to Bishop O'Connell. Pretty wild if you ask me. But with that being said, I think just the fact that, those 2 teams right there, the 2 Patriot District teams out of Alexandria, lost a lot of talent right there. It's been, kind of a rough ride for those 2 teams. I know Alexandria City's off to a really bad start. West Topo, I know, is off to a really slow start as well. Bruins, when they face them, now we're not going to be facing them until the new year. But, with the loss of talent, it's gonna maybe be a tougher season for them. Lake Braddock, improving on the other hand, could have the upper edge against some of those teams, and where I think they could probably be, a top 8 team in the region. So, there are 15 teams in the region. So if they could maybe be top 8, top 7, that would be a really good look for them this year, especially coming off that 3-24 season that they had last year, where they were really bad. The worst season that Coach Metris had, probably in his whole Bruins coaching career. He had been coaching at Lake Braddock since 2001. So that's 23 years now that he's been the Bruins head coach. And so, but this year, again, seems like that they have a lot more talent. Now, that talent, going to have to go through some growing pains, as we saw Friday. They kind of need to remain level-headed and really need to have that same approach for all the games that they have this season, regardless of how tough they are, whether they're really good or they're really bad. Because we've seen so far, we think that they're going to win these games. It's really close. But again, it's really, like I said, it's really interesting to see how some of these teams do play against Lake Braddock and how they play against them. And, it could be, one game, it could look really bad, game look really close, really good. But, you kind of, with Bruins team, you kind of just never know, if they're going to pull off the win or not. Now, looking at the Robinson matchup, this is Robinson team, very good shooting. So Bruins have to bring their good physicality outside, nice shot to overpower them, I think. And, with Robinson, again, they're not a team that's been there last few years, but again, it's one of those Patriot District teams that has really improved. Now, I think this is a game that could go either way. Again, with the Bruins offense, you kind of don't know. The defense could very well keep them in the game. Now, this Robinson team, nowhere near as good as the Edison team that they faced on Friday. Big contrast between the 2 teams there in terms of how good they are. But, still with this Bruins team, again, you're going to have to, again, remain level-headed, not get too ahead of yourself, and, just kind of, really have to rebound well. Bruins are need to get momentum in this district. Robinson's been hot. And the reason I think the Bruins can, beat Robinson is that Robinson actually lost by 15 points to the same Marshall team that Lake Braddock beat last Tuesday. So I think that gives the Bruins a really good shot. That probably puts, gives some very good confidence too. But once again, got to remain level-headed, especially with them, playing some very exciting games this year. And, this is also a team, with those, 2 close losses to Wakefield. It's a very solid Wakefield team, always has been in recent years. Also a relatively good Oakton team that they played really close with. Realistically, they could have won those games. We could be talking about a team right now that's 3-1. The only really loss I would give them would be to Edison. But again, there's a couple of games that the Bruins definitely could have pulled off here and won. So they could have very well be at the top of the Patriot District for his first few games or near the top of it, as we're saying. But again, I feel like, even with Xavier Main come back now, like I said, he didn't have a good game versus Edison. Could be a little rusty, though. come back from football, so it might take time for him to get going. But that's going to be a big offensive boost still for Bruins. And he's been lead scorer the last few years, and that gives the Bruins offense has really struggled. And again, this is a Bruins team that has not been doing well offensively. Have not scored more than 60 points in the game this season so far for the first 4. Again, it's still early. Xavier Maine should give him a boost in that offense, so we'll see what that does in that aspect. But yeah, look forward to that Robinson game. I think the Bruins could pull it off. I highly believe that they can, if they can beat Marshall, who beat Robinson, then no question why Lake Braddock can't keep his Robinson team. Now, Friday, they do face a very good South County team. It's going to be questionable, how they're going to approach that game. Now, with South County, that's also a team that's better than Robinson. So we'll kind of see what they do that game. South County, it's always been a tough matchup for Bruins last few years, especially when they've been state contenders. So, and, the Stallions seem like they could be state contenders again this year. So I think that game will also be very interesting to see how the Bruins defense can deal with them. South County having a high-octane offense there as well, but that game will be at South County and at Robinson. Tuesday, those two schools of Bruins will go to play those games. So we'll see what they can pull off against them, but it will surely be an interesting week for boys hoops at Lake Braddock. So let's get into some girls basketball talk now. So, of course, we mentioned in the opening, they lost in a couple blowouts, a 38-point difference in Vilas Edison, where they were beaten 56-18, and then a Broad Run team from Loudoun County, 45-29 on Friday and Saturday, respectively. In the Edison game, they really struggled getting points, especially in the shooting department. Of course, I was commentating that game, barely hitting any shots. That's obviously something you knew was going to be a big problem this year for this team. Losing great perimeter shooters like Sarah Pritz, who's All-State, one of the best Bruins to ever play girls basketball for them, and then Elena Small, who was also a really good three-point scorer the last couple years for them. But they did do a nice job to bounce back versus Broad Run, where even if they were coming in on short rest, of course, they had 2 games in 24 hours they were playing, and 2 games against very good teams. Now, I don't know if I would say Broad Run is as solid as Edison, but Broad Run does have some pretty good talent that they do bring in their game. But the Bruins did improve in that second game on Saturday. That game was at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. I was also commentating that one as well. They did better for shooting. They were taking a lot more free-pointers, taking a lot more shots. Now, they probably saw that in the Edison game, seeing, hey, we probably needed to take more shots, get more opportunities, because we're not really scoring much right now, so we're probably going to try our chances with a three-pointer to try to build more momentum in scoring, which is something that they've also really struggled with this season. They've not had a game where they've scored more than 40 points. So they're really trying to figure out their shooting woes right now. And they're trying to be aggressive, and that's probably their best approach that they have right now. Additionally, it also gives them something great that they can work on. Of course, we mentioned their shooting woes. Shooting more, of course, they're going to give them a lot more chances to really improve that shooting as well, which is what they're really going to need, especially in the stretch where they're facing 4 really good teams at home. This is a 4-game homestand. I already mentioned Edison and Broad Run, who are really good, who are probably state contenders in their respective, areas. But you're also facing a very good Robinson team tomorrow. I'll be on a broadcast for that. That'll be on the Lake Braddock Student Broadcasting YouTube channel. I'll be on a call. Make sure you tune into that. Time will be 7:30, as well as I'm going to be on a call Friday as well when the Bruins host the Stallions of South County. Be sure to be on that game too. I'll be commenting those 2 games. So thank you guys for the support, and thank you guys who tune into those games as well. But back to what I was saying. So these Robinson and South County teams, it's going to be a tough teams to beat for Bruins in the middle of just a monstrously tough stretch. I don't really think there's a team that could go through a tougher stretch than the Bruins are right now, especially at home. And I'm going to be honest, the Bruins are probably going to go 0-4 in this stretch. They have not really shown that they can keep up with these competitive teams. Now, I know in the first quarter, they kind of kept up with Broad Run on Saturday afternoon. So credit to them for doing that. But again, really overall, what have they shown the Bruins and everyone else this year that's in the stands saying that, hey, we're a real contender? And I'll tell you, this is going to be down year for the Bruins. They honestly do not have a lot of talent compared to the last few years. Of course, not all of that is their fault. They lost a lot of talent after last year. We mentioned the graduation of Sarah Pritz, Lena Small, Mackenzie Holiday. Those are 3 really big losses. Yes, they are. And they just, happen to grow old and graduate. That happens to everybody. But not only that, they also got unlucky with some transfers. I know, you mentioned Sobe Reed. She was really good for the Bruins a few years ago. She came on as freshman. I believe she was all district, honorable mention. She transferred to Bolles High School, which is up in Potomac, Maryland, I believe. And she's been gone. You had Bella Hortenovich, a few years ago. She's gone. She would have been a senior this year. She was a freshman on varsity. So if you read, of course, freshman on varsity, 2 players that, Coach Reed saw with really good talent. Now, they did have a freshman team last year, Pacey Magnuson. Looks like she's hurt right now. She's supposed to be one of the more promising players for Bruins at guard. She is on the bench right now for Bruins. I saw her on a bench those 2 games against Edison Broad Run over the weekend. They had Pacey sitting on a bench. So whatever injury she's doing, if not exactly sure what it is, she'll probably be out for at least a little bit. With it, of course, depending on the injury, it's gonna take time. It's gonna vary. But again, still a very tough season for Bruins so far. Doesn't get any tougher facing that Robinson team that's won 3 straight region titles, 3 straight district titles. Of course, they're led, by the great, Radford commit, D1 player, longtime Ram star, Georgia Simonson, does damage down low on defense in the post. So, we've mentioned those Bruins shooting lows. Something better out last game. Probably see it against Robinson too. You're not going to want to deal with Simonson defending you in the post. You're going to want to take your chances outside where Robinson is younger and more experienced, and you're probably going to want to take your chances with those 3-point shots like the Bruins were doing in that Broad Run game. They were hitting it, so it seems like they're more consistent with that. They got some momentum in that sense going into that game with Robinson. And Friday, we're also facing another really tough a team in South County who's been really good this year, who's expected to be a big state contender over in the Occoquan region. They have some good guards over there. Natalia Wooten and Layla Knoll, I believe, are their names. We've Noah's All-State last year. So that's going to be another tough game for them. They're going to have to really do a good job, trying to probably be more so, guarding them, maybe bring on some double teams there, try to combat them. But they have some really good shooting, so you don't really want them to get loose. You really want to keep an eye on them. You don't want to leave them open. So probably not as much action defending in the paint for South County on Friday. Again, those are 2 of the games to look forward to this week. If you want to see, some good teams play, Lake Braddock in girls basketball, Robinson in South County, 2 very tough games again for the Bruins coming up. All right, so for our final segment of today. Now, this is not usually something, you'd probably hear me talk about until the spring, because spring sports is 3 months away. But I think it's worth mentioning since there's been talks about this lately, and I've been doing some digging for you guys. So we're going to discuss some of the non-district matchups for baseball and softball going into the season. We're going to start off with baseball. So some of the matchups that they have scheduled, this is for their spring break tournament games. So that'll take place during spring break, per usual, every year. There's going to be, they always face challenging teams every year in baseball. Because Bruins have been a great program in baseball for a very long time. one of the most premier programs in the state of Virginia. They still look like to be that this year. I'll get more in depth with them, as we get closer to the spring. But I'll tell you, they're still really good this year. They're going to be facing, one of the teams they're facing is McLean Highlanders. Of course, they won the state title in 6A last year, beat Lake Braddock in the state quarters. Still very good this year, so bringing back a lot of really good pieces. They're also facing Westfield, who they did play last year in the spring break tournament. They beat them soundly 9-3. But Westfield, and they did really struggle last year. They had a new head coach for a program that has a strong baseball tradition that's usually really good as well. But they do have a lot of talented players coming back and should be a much better year for the Bulldogs. Probably a sneaky contender over in that northern region with teams like McLean still being really good. So Madison being really good. South Lakes might still be really good. But yeah, there's certainly still some great talent over there in the northern region, Concord and Liberty District, as there always is. Also, something interesting for Bruins, we'll be facing Edison and Winston Churchill. This is high school from Potomac, Maryland. And Churchill has shown to be pretty good as of recent years. Now, Edison, that's a national district team, of course. We mentioned Edison, in basketball, how good they are and how they set a good example for being a really good national district team that can contend for states, and how they set a prime example for showing that, hey, we're a national district team, even though most of the teams in the district are weak, we're not. We can compete with the big boys, too. We can compete with big girls, of course, if it's a girls' sport. But, Edison, is just not one of those teams that have really had a lot of success in baseball over the last years. In fact, in baseball and softball as a whole, no national district team has been good. You see in state tournament every year, majority of the teams always come out of the Patriot District. So that Edison team, probably the easiest game that the Bruins have, during spring break. But still, very tough teams overall. That Winston Churchill team is pretty good up in Maryland. And actually, those two games will be playing at Lake Braddock. Lake Braddock seems to be host site. Last time I did that was in 2022. My first year calling games for the Bruins, actually. So I'll probably be on a call for a couple of those games when we get to them during spring break. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. And then baseball for their yearly private school matchup. The last couple of years, they have faced St. Albans through the last 3 seasons. But that could change this year. It's not been set in stone yet. But it'll be St. Albans or your team St. John's. For a yearly matchup against a local private school. St. John's, of course, would be a nice change of pace. I'd love to see that matchup. St. John's, one of the premier programs in the area. They're really good over in the private school league. And we with St. Albans. So that would be really interesting to see. Again, the Bruins challenging themselves with a lot of tough teams with, facing a lot of premier programs. And they'll be still really good next year. So there's some matchups for baseball. Now let's kind of move over to softball. So softball, we have some information on them. They usually play a total of 3 out-of-district matchups. They're always around here every year. They go to, either the out-of-district teams go to Braddock, or they just go to the other team's field, which they play at. So first of all, you guys might see this on Max Preps. For those of you who haven't seen it, Max Preps has a game listed on Lake Braddock softball page. They're listed to play Langley. That game is at Langley on the 28th of April. Now, it's a very good Langley team. I believe they won the Liberty District last year. I know they lost a few key seniors, but they still have a lot of really good players coming back. And especially think they're a 2-way player. I think Nora Jocks is her name. She was the Liberty District Player of the Year freshman, so she's coming back to sophomore. She's going to be really good. So Lake Braddock is going to be facing a really talented Langley team from the Liberty District. Definitely a team that will probably be contending for states next year in Concord, along with the Concord district teams in the Northern Region. Of course, for our rival in McLean Highlanders, we're still bringing back a lot of pieces from their state championship team a couple years ago. They beat Braddock in the state quarterfinals 2-0. And of course, you still also have, Concord district, you have South Lakes, who is probably the regional district favorites over there, I should say. Madison, although they lost a lot of seniors, they're probably still going to figure out some way. They're always one of the premier softball programs in the state of Virginia, have been for a really long time, pretty much since their inception, I believe back in the 70s. They've been around just as long as Braddock has. So that's going to be interesting to see with Langley, another state contending team And Lake Braddock seems to also be a state contending team again next year as well. Actually, as they seem, they will be definitely with the number of talent they have come back. They're always a very strong program in softball. And it seems like there's going to be 2 new matchups that will replace the yearly Yorktown and Washington and Liberty matchups we've seen in the last few years. Now, of course, I don't think Lake Braddock probably wanted 3 Liberty District teams. Yorktown and Washington Liberty, of course, are from the same district that Langley is, Liberty. So I don't think, Coach Claus and his staff were, wanted the same 3 Liberty District teams on a schedule. They probably want to change it up a little bit, because the last 3 seasons they faced those 2 same teams. And give credit to them, Yorktown's one of the better teams over there in the northern region. They've had some strong teams over there as of late. WNL, after the time that they started playing them, they were still listed as really good this year. If they were coming off states in 2021, they lost to South County. WNL was still really good. But, ever since maybe the 2022 season, they really haven't been at their best. They've really struggled over there. So they probably want to take them off the schedule. Maybe, change it up as well. But here are the other 2 teams that they seem to be facing. So if you guys want to give a drum roll, please. Oakton and Hayfield. Those are their 2 teams that Lake Braddock softball will be facing spring of 2025. So let's go over this, this Oakton team. So Oakton, of course, from Concord District. They're, of course, so they compete in the same district as Madison, South Lakes, Westfield, Chantilly, and Centerville. This is usually an Oakton team. We talk about how competitive Concord is. Madison, South Lakes, Westfield, all very good in softball. Oakton has not really been up there. They've really struggled in softball the last few years. I'd say that district has half, teams that could probably, winning for after best, make a run in the states. And the other half of the district is just really bad. Oakton is part of that really bad half. But here's the thing about Oakton. They actually had a much better season last year. They improved, I believe, from like a 1-2 win season year before and improved to being 9-7. So they definitely were one of the most improved teams in the area last year. And Oakton actually showed some grit. They actually beat that South Lakes team that made states and beat Lake Braddock 2-0. They beat them 10, Oakton beat South Lakes in a 10-9 shootout. So, but it is kind of interesting to me that Bruins would schedule Oakton still. Now, they are probably, a lot of people probably expecting to build off their momentum last year, their first winning season in quite a while. But Oakton, looking at your Concord District teams, they haven't been as competitive and consistent as some of the other teams like South Lakes and Westfield and Madison has. So I'm wondering, what the Bruins' thought process is there. Maybe they see them as a really good contender. Now, we're not going to know much about that until around the time of the spring when the official rosters come out. So we'll kind of know then, who more so Oakton and, some of these other teams in the area are with some of their new players. Now, I don't know if they have like a really good pitcher coming up. It's like Mackenzie Verdejo good, or who seems to be the next really good pitcher to come out of Virginia, next D1, and bring a spark to an Oakton softball program that's not been very good overall in their history too, not just the last recent years also. Again, I would kind of expect, if the Bruins, would probably schedule a team that's more consistent, who's shown a lot more winning over the last several years and have been really consistent in doing that, since the Bruins are a state contending team themselves. Again, next year, I think I'm just going to say this right now, I think they're favorites to win the district and the region. So, they probably see that as themselves as well. Same thing I just said. And so they should be up there with some of the upper echelon teams in the state to go for a state title. So the other team, of course, will say Hayfield. Now, of course, they're in the same region as Lake Braddock. They're from a national district. In Hayfield, of course, it's either Hayfield, really Edison, of course, mentioned one exception, Lewis and boys soccer, but Hayfield, Edison are kind of a team, if any school in that district has a team that's competing for states, it's going to be the Hawks and or the Eagles. As we talked about in basketball, football, whichever sport it is. It doesn't have to be baseball, softball, or any of those sports I mentioned. But again, we say that Hayfield and baseball and softball have not been very good, even though they've shown to have really good records. In fact, Hayfield in softball had a undefeated season a couple years ago, going into the region quarterfinal round, only to get upset by a very mediocre Woodson team from a Patriot district. Now, Woodson team wasn't even that good. They were well under 500. And that was an Oakton team or Woodson team, I should say, that was really bad offensively. And so that you wouldn't really expect to put up a fight against really a lot of teams that are around here. But they just got lucky facing a Hayfield team that, always seems to be very good, but it's kind of a poster child for a, national district team. We all see this too. National district teams that look really good, but aren't, they have a good record since they beat up on really bad teams in their district that are much worse than they are. And Hayfield just happens to be the best out of the team in their district, or Edison or whoever it is. And they just always have such tough time beating non-conference teams because they're not prepared to face the tough out-of-district opponents that they'll have to if they want to go out and win a state title. And Hayfield still seems to be that right now. And again, they've shown that again for a long time. There's not been a national district team to make states in baseball or softball. We're talking about softball specifically here, and it seems like aeons. So again, another really interesting thing there. Now, if I were the Bruins, if you want to say that they probably would have wanted to, of course, if you're competing for states, they want some challenge in your out-of-district schedule. If they're going to go out of their way, go through all this trouble to schedule, to try to schedule teams out of their district, they should make it worth it. We saw last year, they got a solid Yorktown team. Now they beat them 9-3. So they got a solid Yorktown team. Now the only team I'll probably take off is WNL. They've not been very, very good the last couple of years, but they were probably thinking that they were going to be very good when they scheduled, these yearly games, these 3 straight years back in 2022. They were probably thinking that they were going to be really good and that they would provide a good challenge for a Bruins team. Now, that was actually kind of rebuilding still at the time. The Bruins kind of went away for a couple of years, being a state contender. You didn't know if they were going to be a state contender going into 2022. They just happened to kind of get a spark in the playoffs, upsetting the undefeated West Springfield Spartans in the regional tournament that year. And then they kind of rided off to beat South County in the region semis, and then they went on to make states, losing the region semis to region final game to Robinson, and then they lost the state quarterfinal game to Madison that year. But still, as a Bruins team that still showed a lot of promise, had kind of showed that program was going to get revived. They got Coach Claus over as head coach. He turned the Bruins around in 2023. They made it to the state tournament for the first time. Since the year before, of course, but really the first time as a true state contender for the first time in probably about maybe 5 years up to that point. So Bruins, that year they came back, but now that they've kind of, established themselves being back to a really good program, because before, Coach Ramori retired, unfortunately he passed away. The Bruins, were still a really good team under him. And, they were a team that was pretty much competing for a state title every year. Unfortunately, they never won it. But still, they were up there as one of the best teams in the state all the time. So, like I said, if you're going to make these out-of-district games worth it, it probably should be against teams that are going to provide you a challenge, teams that you're probably going to face in states. Or, team, if you want to go to other state classes, do that too if you can. We're talking about, I know Braddock last year, they faced a good Yorktown team. They faced the Battlefield team, went to the state finals where they pitched, they only lost 1-0. And they didn't have Mackenzie Verdejo on the mound. It's Natalia Jimenez on the mound. Mackenzie Verdejo, of course, is a Bruins ace. She's one of the best pitchers in the whole state right now. All state back-to-back years, arguably the best pitcher in Bruins softball history. She didn't even pitch at all that game. And, they were able to hold Battlefield to, just a 1-0 lead that game. But as I was saying, maybe schedule Battlefield again. Or if you're going to, if you want to mention Fairfax County teams around here, schedule one of the better Concord teams, maybe Westfield. That could maybe be a nice little challenge. South Lakes, who beat you in states last year, it'd be a good way to get back at them by winning against them. Schedule a good Madison team. You want to go to, now if you want to schedule another Liberty team, schedule McLean on that slate for you. And And then, if you want to go to, like I said, go to Prince William, there's some other solid teams down there like Battlefield. Of course, you have Osborne Park, who won a state title in 6A last year. You have them. They're still going to be really good. They're always good year in, year out. Colgan's really good down there. I think Forest Park, Patriot are some pretty decent teams. Woodbridge Senior is pretty decent down there as well. But there are some nice teams down there that the Bruins could definitely schedule. If you want to throw in, maybe the one Loudon team in 6A, Freedom South Riding, that I think is another, solid team I think the Bruins could have a bit of trouble with. But again, a little interesting, decisions the Bruins chose for their out-of-district matchup. But again, Oakton, Hayfield, all your matchups for Bruins softball next year. Baseball, McLean, Westfield, either St. John, St. Albans for a private school game. You have Edison, Winston Churchill, who they will host at Lake Braddock, as they will be a host site for some spring tournament games. So you have that going on. And with that concludes our final segment of the Adam Mazzara Show today. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, for watching. Be sure to leave a like, hit that subscribe button, hit notifications, share a friend, and I will see you guys on the next episode. Peace.